Dear Judge Napolitano, dear Scott Ritter and other sources, dear Chief, you have failed to listen to what Chief said. And when I say Chief, forget the president. You guys can't speak for presidents. You can't be honest about James Madison because you guys came through both campuses. You want to have passions, emotions. It's clear as day. James Madison's plan and the founders behind that plan, that's what they used. Before George Washington demonstrably had no choice but to use James Madison's plan. But he agreed to use that plan and lead it in that because no one had free speech. No one had the right or the ability to defend their motivations for roles with getting behind the Declaration of Independence, getting behind the Constitutional Convention, and getting behind the Civil War. If you had been educated properly, you would have in it from America to Russia to Ukraine. The suburbs are manifest. What our founders declassified, they actually communicated. The suburbs were designed for a torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature slavery method, therefore physical. More than 13 colonies entrenched, roles with it having been sustained, and then America's founders were born. And they communicated for us to refer to themselves plural as James Madison singular and his plan. And then they went and got to George Washington's degree to help them to use that plan, which was, what was that plan about? That plan was to force the other founders, northern colonies and so at key locations, to break those rules just a little bit. And they have no means to defend themselves. That's how psycho the laws were, which were also timed collusions with collusion/s, with in other words, all that we have replaced too, people playing music in the background and using the words of our founders, leaving out what they declassified about that, pretending they believed that they, and actually believing that they had free speech. Black pupils, that's a complete insult. And we should have the right to use passions and emotions regarding where and how and why. Black pupils' whites of eyes has been left out from what it is inseparable from. Like when you all have entertained, as you have entertained as the only people allowed to be heard, treatments of subjects like slavery as an isolated subject, inseparable from what witch trials are about, right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Further sense and sensibilities, narratives, nature debate, not just its overall, but with nature debate inside with the finite details. Black pupils know and groups. This volume science that religions are about, obviously, more probably, and demonstrably, they are about that identity of value/value progression that is hyper invisibly not our species body, not the other species bodies, but it is all species bodies of indivisible bodies with all group differences being generated by itself. To an extent, we can discern this. And who denies it has inherent to, active to, and progressive to their nature of logic and their logic demonstration /s of the same thing /s. You guys had obligations to understand about not you. Oh, you don't know what the LP4 is with the nuclear. What do you know? All you have to know is that you have to get it shuts people's mouths up. And people who came through campuses replacing the founding principle and the principles of nature itself with black pupils, whites of eyes, and the revelations here that generate. In other words, we have this replaced. In other words, you guys are pretending passions and emotions with some black KKK, Latino theme, Confederate flag theme, and you're leaking. What are you doing with next to Trinity College since I was a kid with my neighbors? This Galal family and their educators, increasingly tied with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, and one with the Smith family. We're going to examine the Marines' roles with this. Judge Napolitano, please get Scott Ritter to keep his passions unless he's going to keep them true always. In other words, stay calm too. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, switching branches, interbranch. A bunch of people with the Marines and the Air Force with the Britain Superior Court involved all along Route 3 from the Route 175 and Route 3. But Route 175 and its conjunctions to that, there are proofs that this problem is manifest interstate because is relative to confessions and demonstrations right where people are recorded pretending other too. In other words, that's why we have they can't. That's why they're switching names and forging names into branch. Also, as the hyper evidential, for example, for so to speak. In other words, they're refusing to identify themselves legitimately because that's one of the things that nature has been demonstrating to us. Not that nature's demonstrations, communications are replaced, and our founders. But in other words, we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. We are being communicated to about difference. So we have relativity being demonstrated to us. That's another reason black pupils, whites of eyes, are inseparable from subject treatments like slavery that are so serious. And we've only had fake passions and emotions and use /s of truth to lie about that. That's what's going on in the intellect of you guys when you fight to use words like genocide rather than predicate acts and acting tied to it. Because that's what you guys have roles with predicate acts with facts methods. In other words, in criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects in nature. Get me off fake conversations with the Marines also involved with Channel 3 News, WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, and their roles with whiting forensics. They have the F.B.I. being recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I tried to get it. It's recorded too. They're the ones leaking this. I offered them. I'll just identify yourselves legitimately into print. Get on paper. They've been stacking fake things in databases since I was a kid, as collusion /s with all natures of crime scenes, and then it brings up a whole bunch of people and other crime scenes at the same time. Know how a whole bunch of people that get arrested for crimes, even real crimes, things that they put in people in jails for. They have way worse roles and collusions, even when those people actually do those things. When did the witch trials stop being what they're about, even if they're completely made up? There's a witch trials place next to Webb Stevens Museum, next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Originally, it didn't even have a though. It was just Webb House. See, they're obfuscating the evidences of history. This is why the president gets mad at the people woke. In other words, plus there are black and white collusions clear as day that anyone labeled white or black wants to speak about. That breaching method assigned those crazy laws, not the color itself. And no one's actually white. No one's actually black except for the black pupils, whites of eyes, everyone. Everyone tactical terrier from how it's spoken. How we focus on that because no one has free speech, and because of the torture method that is in place since before they were shown by the breaching method needs to hide that and self-valued roles recorded right where they don't self-evaluate. Oh, but I was a victim. How could I self-evaluate? It's recorded. Off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices, whole bunch of natures of organized crimes and people with conjunctions to that are involved with the people at the World Trade Center. When did the natures of trade? When did our founders tell us, our founders declassified? They didn't even have free speech. We're supposed to address, not just because there's slavery. Slavery's over the Civil War. You guys are even lying about those causes of the Civil War. James Madison's principal plan, natures. And James Madison, the founders behind him, plural too. See, president /chief. They had to force the rest of the founders, that in other words, no one knew what to do, and no one went. All the solutions left and are still forcing self-value, leaving out the hyperforeign, that which had slavery, sickly, non-distinctly southern colonies and northern colonies entrenched. That comes with the hyper-evidential generated by nature itself. Also, with that ignored, forced away from here, the sophistication of the species body, of individual body systems, and methods of showing us this distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. That which is the body of what we are discerning, where and how we can discern where and how we are really, and why really we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb. The parts of speech of English grammar and of other languages, they are about the invisible but still discernible. This hyper additional with this state we are as body, with relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, while as a quality of diffusion, further positive or negative, and, and neutrality slash neutralizing. There is a trinity inseparable from all the smallest finite detail. And the difference of it, I mean, in other words, English was revealed with the other modern languages. They were revealed at a time before the sciences became criminally foreign influence slash hyper criminally foreign influence. For example, from off their locations, specifically to exploit the phenomenon where only locations, areas, and states' names could operate the phenomenon of the country name, and where and how it's relative, where the breaching method consciously took us to systems tactical ulterior from the one that shows us group differences, where it's in the process of where we can discern its singular identity to an extent, which comes simultaneously with grouped, hyper invisible, but still discernible, distinct parts of itself. For example, the future that we could discern that's not even here now, even if it never gets here, the seasons that are not even here, and wants and needs us to discern to an extent its body as the seasons that aren't here. That's why, in other words, and Earth's a special difference as our own, as that of the other species' bodies, as its own. The identity of all space slash existence, which is functional being, hyper invisible but still discernible, distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And this is also so a predicate is a word for a verb. A participle, a present participle, a past participle, these are words for verbs, a gerund, an infinitive. And know how the present participle and past participle, there are only two of them because those are two distinct ways of discerning the body of the hyper invisible but still discernible itself. Again, another way still discernible and inseparable from it, from that trinity part of itself, is the like, for example, to see the future. It's the same connected system. It's the same connected value slash value progression, distinct from all others, well, not by any way. So many pray, but also now hyper additionally because only voices that have come through abridged sciences since semi-ancient times have been allowed to speak, or have allowed anyone else to, as entertained, to convictions, fact, human nature, quality, aspects of nature, finite, grouped, and simultaneously hyper additionally being relevant this way. Presidents and chiefs and the people of the body over need to understand the impositions caused by electrical generation needs, while and how we have entertained economies tactical ulterior from how our founders communicated for us too. All natures of expertise have been using the knowledge of good and evil, so to speak, to get over on what principle and pretending other, like with little scams, pretending passions and emotions regarding us, like with someone's reaction to someone with KKK confessions, like a Mark Violet, who's also confessed with involved with black, white, KKK, Latino theme with the intelligence military at UConn. His mother's involved with all kinds of drugs and racketeering with psychiatry at Harvard Hospital, intelligence involved with the World Trade Center attack. Before it, a bunch of courts personally and professionally involved with them, state judicial branch offices in conjunctions to it, increasingly timed collusions with the use/s of names at and next to body dumping spots. Same ones involved at and next to the corrections offices, planting roles with all kinds of ways, all natures of investigators, wherein are used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Little styles like there are people at Fox News and next to Fox News and involved with their uses of their own religions. Like there's, in other words, with the St. Anthony's Church, some Jewish themed domain brothers involved with sexual abuses, involved with fact-cheating nature predicate acts and federal evidences crimes and child abuses roles, including identity theft, fraud, slanders. There's an Allison Mulcahy involved with the FBI in foreign countries and co-defendants and family members of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, like a Thaddeus Grabowski. She's involved with next to Fox Connecticut News with a whole bunch of different things. I never had a word of conversation with her in my life. The only time I was ever near was right near before a 2006 district court case with co-defendants, a defendant, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants. One of them being having been a Thaddeus Grabowski, but he's involved with this Allison Mulcahy and some domain brothers with intelligence on off 2-hour highway where it runs into Hangdog Lane and conjunctions to that and to that, like Route 3 and the state judicial branch offices and the Berlin Turnpike. All along the Berlin Turnpike, people involved with whiting forensics have also been all along Route 3 and Route 175 from the founding locations, where it is relative to and very serious, where and how others being and has been in layers communicated about the founding locations than our founders had meant to have communicated for it. The Marines and other military have roles with names at the corners of streets on Church Street in Old Wethersfield. And with the Kerr family, for example, also at other corners of streets involved with federal evidences, crime acts and methods, wire crime acts and methods. There are Wethersfield police that attached me to fake conversations with them at the police station as a kid. And now that wasn't at all. And now as an adult, that wasn't at all. In other words, increasingly, there's a domain family and his educators are involved with some Jewish themed, repeated to get a reaction. I had no reaction, repeated sexual things about it being she's Jewish, a daughter of a guy near me, who's increasingly involved with fire departments, with crime, with federal, with predicate acts methods too. They've been putting, recording what happens when they go to instances and they're building up fake things and then they cover that up. And a breaching method shows them they have to cover that up. And then they have to hide things tied to that. So they're phenomenal. Their roles with the crime scenes next to it and or they run into Hartford Hospital and other hospitals to cover up live progressions. No one looks in those databases. Before the World Trade Center attack, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with a whole bunch of different countries, and people involved with proven through the years, apart child abusers, leaders of the kids. They had time roles too with uses of untimely deaths and body dumping spots and names next to them. Increasingly, these are people involved with the KKK, Black Theme, Confederate. They're making it sound like I even saw people on campuses before or know them. In other words, and I don't know that Justin Levinskis, like right before I graduated, for 1 second, he had a Lucinda. He was influenced to have a Lucinda be seen next to me with him. That's apparently his wife, and she apparently went to my grammar school. I never saw her in my grammar school in my life. I never saw her anywhere except for that. And then one time near that body dumping spot. But he's increasingly involved with a bunch of Marines and different people with the services from Central Connecticut State University, like a Parker English too. I believe that was him too on Walker Hill Road. A DeMoore family has a Walker Hill Road involved with a whole bunch of people with judges and prosecutors, with Hartford Hospital, putting fake things and with the judicial branch office and corrections offices, with people involved with the Marines, Air Force, and other natures of pilots through time doing things they're not supposed to do, and then they have to hide that. The breaching method shows them right when and where and how they have to hide it. Why? And then their roles with the World Trade Center attack has all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders with the people associated with that place. Because that's one of the things that the breaching method has manifest against ourselves, where with black pupils, white survivors, communications were our place. This is an identity theft, fraud, slander method, 3 ways manifest, not just 3 ways manifest: torture, extortion, fact, human nature, slavery. Therefore, physical. Black pupils. You think they could defend with honesty the names of the people, the sciences, why and how? The suburbs were designed before, even though they were designed before America's founders were born, for and by a torture, extortion, fact, nature, extortion, and slavery method. They're still manifest that way. Hartford, right next to Wethersfield, old Wethersfield, is a suburban / urban, set up to be described that way. No, not far from the state capitol, the Harriet Beecher Stowe Mark Twain House, increasingly involved with people that the intelligence people community make confessions about, but also because the breaching method itself made confessions about it. And we had means to discern this since we were kids, as I did and have, and could show us all. Here, wow. Next to the campuses I went, the Marines have collusions with names next to those campuses too. Increasingly with Hartford Hospital names too, with the businesses and houses next to it. And people that just drive by, their family members, like of journalists too. They've been planting evidences with names next to schools, intercities, identity theft, fraud, slanders, timed collusions with other countries' intelligence families, their differences, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, the same way originally instilled by the function of the breaching method to keep itself increasingly screened and all self-valued roles with that. That's what's recorded where and how. One might ask themselves the question, how could they have left out and replaced all the revelations generated by where and how slavery was entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly, non-distinctly, and even though no one wanted that, and where and how, even though there people say, oh, because they wanted it for money and things like that, they're using those truths for lies. Everyone can't imagine how other people could be motivated to such. That's why you need to pay attention to what I caught them doing with the campuses and stop putting me in fake conversations with the news and the interbranch at the same time. Channel 3 News, WFSB, in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, they have collusions of people with intelligence next to their location, also as ones next to Fox Connecticut News. These are intelligence families involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Lister, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. Now, for example, this is a grouping, a criminal enterprise. And no, nature is showing us that we are human species, individual species, body of individual bodies with all group differences generated by that one distinct individual, hyper invisible, but still discernible identity of value / value progression. The same one as why and how we need more than one word for the verb. The same one and as why. Two of those verbs, for two of those names for verbs are the participle, are the present participle and the past participle. And then why and how they're about time, but leaving out the future. Because there are distinct ways of seeing the distinct parts of itself. With the rest of the complete identity of all space / existence, it doesn't fit in here. It is too finite while simultaneously being too great. And with active relativity, that won't mix with the part that is mixed with matter as itself, in the part that is not, that has not already been made, in the part that is not, that is as a conjunction to the rest, where more and more of the identity of forever nature, of the identity of all space slash existence, is making more of itself. But again, it is functional, being hyper invisible, but distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. So, for example, if we have black pupils, whites of eyes, it itself shows us means the greatest experts together. In a moment, we could discern them as systems tactabilitarian from its own, when its own is also not only positive as criminal insidious in its nature is a positive, let alone criminal insidious nature is a positive and negative as timed collusions to keep from discernment the identity of relativity to ourselves of the breaching method slash S, which every identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, while being a quality of diffusion. Again, where and how more and more identity of forever nature is being made. And this is how English was really revealed to be taught. Boxing is fought, but by the rules. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, they're about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been tactically abridged since some ancient times to keep the names of the people of the sciences, names of the people of the sports, names of the people of the theater, only capable of fighting, music, defending passions, emotions, and opinion nature, syntax, dishonestly, criminally foreign influence slash tactically, slash hyper criminally foreign influence slash tactically delusions raw. Factor nature, quality aspects of nature relative to this principle. James Madison's plan. How and why the founders behind him wanted and directed us to understand him as the founder and his plan. That's what George Washington used. If you don't understand that, if one doesn't understand that, as Americans don't, because they have his communications in place, they have it, even though it's declassified, even though it's known. It's not known on a mass scale because they measure and maintain self-valued roles with that. The breaching method does. But then through our own, showing that it needs to do that in self-valued roles with that too. The self-value part is critical because at A through Z, it already forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. The names operating the phenomena of the country's names, having blamed other things, others ourselves, and we're right where nature is increasingly showing that wrong, but needed to be valued in logic and reason. We have debate about American history. We have the wrong outcomes because you have the first principle out of sequence. This is where knowledge of good and evil is forged, proper, right? Patch and play. Get on name and paper, one name in sequence, Connecticut into branch. You got me over here demanding Judge Napolitano to file mandated law for you. Connecticut judicial branch offices in your conjunctions with the F.B.I. Ye fear now. You put that there yourself. For ye the needs to fear. Prepare, Marines. So in other words, there are a bunch of people tied to the Stephen Stocker too, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, wire crime acts and methods with Wethersfield police, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with him, and with people tied to apparently his wife. I don't know. Maria Vazino's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I never saw on a Wethersfield campus in my life a bunch of people involved with identity theft, frauds, putting predicate acts with facts and databases at Wethersfield campuses, and roles with differences, racketeering, intercultural and intracultural, little fakes, black and white, originally and still, that would keep other things used as tools too by worse to keep other things, others, ourselves blamed for how the breaching method reassigned black pupils whites of eyes. But still, we have these voices speaking black and or white without this clear. That means appear. You follow mandated law. In other words, these people planting faith motivation, they can't put it on paper. Then we're trying not to give up our sources and methods. You're giving them up. You have a whole bunch of people all along Route 175 with some black KKK, Confederate flag thing, Latino thing, per them. Mark Violet and Justin Levinsky will tell you they're just being influenced to act by their roles with the intelligence, and they shouldn't have done. They lied into databases too, with a whole bunch of other people from other countries when they were kids. That also made confessions. They were criminally. They were used remotely, criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions wrought. They're traitors to their country when they deny that. They should just be honest about that. What are they doing with the people from Korea, Russia, and Ukraine? And their doctors. Harvard Hospital has roles with people from Russia and Ukraine, involved intercities with people planting evidences on my street with a Leahy family that fake conversations with me. You get them on paper, please, Judge Napolitano. Get them. They had no. They forged a Dr. Shab CLE's name too, and other whatever. They put all kinds of fake transcripts. They forced me there for 3 days. And in other words, I didn't even communicate with anyone. I saw the first person, Brendan Leahy. I recognized him, and I knew his name from other people that told me his name. I never had a word of conversation with him. I only have one word to his father, and I still can't get them on paper. They won't communicate with me. There was one black doctor I tried to communicate with him. He's involved with a whole bunch of people, the Smith family, the Colon family, and the C.M. Paglione family, with a bunch of judges involved with wire crimes on my street, and with some untimely deaths years apart, and murder spots rules, like with a Robert Rodriguez, a Michael Roberts also is involved with shopping centers with him, and other people associate him with people with differences, and people at the bordering countries and the bordering states, in ways that were with unions that have been here since before our founders were born. They have been here and there, traitors. They have all kinds of psychiatry right through world wars. They have roles with collusions with differences, like pretending passions and emotions, sequenships, with words like like anti-Semitism. They're involved with identity. That's why I didn't respond to that Riley family, but now it keeps getting brought up. And Fox News has these domains involved with them, and Anthony Yagman also with a Joshua Julian with digital crimes with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Mark Violet also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him involved with that. And even if the Marines are faking it, because they were constantly faking since I was a kid, they have people acting on both sides of issues. In other words, and they they have people walk next to you when you're next to the campuses, and make it look like a fake time, because that's how corrupt. In other words, the difference of guilt is also employed by the breaching method. That's how corrupt it is. In other words, in ways we all know, just relative to black people's whites of eyes. I'm not even a lawyer. We're going to call this a predicate acts with facts method, which is behind it. And the people, in other words, we agree about things like the water. We want it all clear. We want it lifted and energy generated by dropping. We can generate more energy and save more energy and make more beautiful energy and means out of nowhere by lifting water than it takes to drop it. See, we have the suburbs were designed in America to Russia, to Ukraine, before America's founders were born. So you guys want to speak about who knows more about who or who? You guys don't know Russia. Black pupils, peer. In other words, some people in Russia like boxing. Some people don't. I know that from here because I have black pupils, whites of eyes. In other words, I know that there's a hyper foreign, criminal foreign influence, distinct from criminal foreign influences. I know that in other words, nature itself can be used to show everyone this. But not if everyone was pretending passions and emotions with interbranch refusing to identify themselves. They already recorded themselves. Collusion /S interstates and internationally with all sides of criminal and civil cases. and the court's names, the names at the judicial branch offices, corrections offices, names next to it, what going by it, involved with it, actually, which manifest in backgrounds with the courts and things. They have predicate acts with facts methods, wherein how they and they increasingly self-evaluate, wherein how the breaching method is set up, the grounds where no one could afford to afford not monetarily. In other words, the nature, you can't grow things for everyone. All exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration /s of the same thing in the form, like even if it is still, nature will be demonstrating negative value, nature progressions, acts of nature. Nature longs earth to special difference for all parts of itself at the same time. Least of Hadith is more probably having been defined by the ancients of pantheism as force, space, nature transfer. Pantheism before the sciences became force, trick, term, persuaded roles, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, and roles with nature's demonstrations of it, instead employed effectively to enact roles blaming, forcing for other apparent reasons than actual other things others themselves blamed with that. No one wanted that. No one anticipated that. The breaching method chose them in their factual nature and where things are unfolding, where we're around each other. There's a mass identity theft, fraud, slander method. A whole bunch of people involved with probate court judges, involved with all kinds of medicines, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, attached me to fake conversations and ties to people in my family since I was a kid. And it affects things because they have each age of factual nature. They're covering up live progressions at and between campuses with whole predicate acts methods there recorded. It's not just the sexual or medical offender. So they separate the subjects because they can't afford to have discern. Oh, because then people will be put in jail for too many charges at once. That's not by accident. This breaching method shows you guys how to justify and read American history. You guys are placed. You have the experts on the law, self-valuing how the experts on American history have been using the knowledge of good and evil to get over on that principle of why and of how. James Madison and his plan and the leverage behind the founders with that got George Washington to use that plan and have the people counter-extorted, forced to help them make a country. But in other words, and break the crazy laws. But they were internationally, I learned that in notes at Central Connecticut State University, they were internationally monitored conversations where it was against the law. For anyone to even have been heard, anyone, even if they heard someone speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, and they didn't tell on that. And that was time collusions with overt criminal enterprise Bible. This is a shell game with the differences. Where and how the people that, who gets elected or what, they came through campuses of bridge. There were already roles of predicate acts and facts. You have roles of predicate acts and facts when you're little kids. When you had other communicated for you yourselves and for your family members. Then they communicated. And then our souls communicate. There was a human factor nature breaching method against Native Americans, sustained. It's the same one sustained against us all and using differences, but everything it uses and does is through ourselves. So then when nature demonstrates about that later too, other things, others themselves, they get away with showing how they can blame it on that. This breaching method made the identities of order to speak for order as systems tactical terror from nature's hypersingular identity of order that comes simultaneously with the parts of itself hyper relative to the rest of its complete identity. We are shown that this is more probably, demonstrably, why and how cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall /S is manifest. And with the appreciation of gases and its elements, and water and its elements, with the body / bodies of life have this identity of value progression. Hyper additionally, with the water and its elements, and the gases in its elements, and its mixture, positive or negative, no. We're being communicated to simultaneously by a hypernative system that we can't appreciate until we can appreciate the native system. And when we can't appreciate the native system properly, someone's supposed to show us, because that's how we can discern that we're not appreciating the hyper invisible, the hyper native system. The hyper invisible, but still discernible. Not only is it with the body of English, this is how too with subject. Subject is another invisible but still discernible part of English grammar and the other grammars. Is 3 ways, has 3 parts of itself too. In other words, we can only deal with subjects individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent. And while there are more subjects being generated, having been that we could discern and to come at the same time, we are shown this the same way. There's the same identity of values. So I am a pantheist, but I'm a pantheist who believes and can show us it is more probable and practical and demonstrable that Muhammad is. I believe that Muhammad is the last messenger of what is about also how the campuses are still criminally foreign and exceptions tied to them. They're still criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. And this is why and is how, for example, per science, the beginning of the Old Testament comes with a part, that says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. See, but there's a nature of theater that the names of the people of sciences have been stayed. That is as criminal insidiousness. I'm not aware of it, / hypercriminal insidiousness. We could show people, lawyers that are recorded collusions at the same time with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and with the court's names, and with the corrections officers' names and judicial offices, and the differences of the guilt there next to it or conjunctions to it. And this is simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, increasingly. This is really why and how the judicial branch offices is conjunctive to Route 3. I don't even know all their names, but one of the things he communicated in his confession without meaning to, he's got a bunch of sons he doesn't even know, because they non-verbally and by others were confessed and demonstrated where they're involved with these Mendes police, the fake conversation we had at the police station. I didn't have one conversation with any of them when I went there. They have 4 Saudis involved with them, 4 roles, investigations of it, trying to make them have self-value roles to cover up their roles with the guilt. These are the same ones involved with the names next to the World Trade Center in New York City, and the court next to it. Both sides of that case. And right there, both sides of one of the cases in the 9th Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers, or the court next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the World Trade Center attack in Manhattan, New York. In other words, inside the court, they put a sequence. They changed the date or something to make it appear as if it had been handed in late, so they could rule that way, and that was proven afterwards. So right before but all names on all sides of that case too, and their sources were recorded increasingly collusion / S against me too, and with news at the same time. It's also recorded at Connecticut's WFSB Channel 3 News. They have a whole bunch of people next to the state capitol and next to WTNH, and with WTNH sources at corners of streets people that live on corners of streets, also planting evidence at corner streets and next to kids' houses. Also with confessions about Russians involved. A bunch of ways. That's one of the ways. These are people involved also with Air Force, with a Paul Kelly, with a Violet family, and a bunch of foreign and domestic doctors on the Harvard Hospital's campus, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes at the same time, with judges and prosecutors and their family members. They have their kids involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, relative to the rules of predicate acts with facts, methods, and a method slash S in speaking about crimes anyway. There were the difference of the courts being the worst collusion slash S at the campuses, overt criminal enterprises or private ones. That is also self-used by others too, right through themselves. In other words, because they have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought readings of statutes and exceptions with all truths to pretend other. Because they had collusion slash S too, screening the breaching method clearer than day. And I put this, I'm only saying this, I shouldn't give up because this is how my movie and cartoon was supposed to go. You're not supposed to give away your secrets. But you guys are worse than criminally incompetent with readings of of reality, with readings of the beginning of the Quran, readings of the beginning of the Old Testament. It's like they have a key, that guide to how to appreciate them properly. No one even hears those parts because you guys have self-value rules with sequence shifts, with differences racketeering worse than war crimes, and motivations planting to cover up use slash S of location slash S collusion slash S. And the differences of guilt, it hides behind that too, don't forget. It's recorded how the justice system has, differentially worse or victim or victim predator roles, forcing only to be collusions with gangs and with the agencies too, and the courts. They have collusions with the gangs. I don't know if the state of Connecticut corrections officers are also increasingly involved with people involved with home break-ins. All kinds of evidence is racketeering worse than war crimes. All kinds of natures of any kind of, they're not legitimately standing any place. I'm not saying that they don't have needs and means. I mean, they don't have needs to be standing illegitimately because we are not alone here or there. And I'm not saying that what appears to be debatable about what's legitimate, that you guys could appreciate that problem. That's why you can't get on paper one name and sequence. You know that you are shown that there are means for us to discern how all sides of criminal and civil cases, with the names at the court, even the names of the different positions with the court, they are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, involved with predicate acts with facts, federal evidences, crimes, methods, way worse than things they put little kids in jail for, to really hurt those kids while pretending other. For the breaching method, too, needs that. Right through a world war, psychiatry had roles with nutbags with the religions, jumping in our business dishonestly, stealing our identities, losing any truth for lie to. Oh, bring things before a court or sue. That's why I get them on paper into branch. Connecticut into branch, Connecticut Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Court, and people with the Connecticut District Court. Before the World Trade Center attack, they have predicate acts with Wethersfield into branch and the state corrections and judicial branch offices that were also acted collusion slash S at West Hartford locations. That's why you have to get them on paper, one name and sequence. In other words. And they already recorded collusions with this, involved with the Diddy case. There are proofs that this is to cover up things with all sides of that case and the court itself and the news itself. At the same time, collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, even with ones not even involved in the case involved. And I don't know, and with my neighbors and people tied to them from other areas, planting evidence on my street, acting fake ties, fake nature ties to me. I never had one word of response to Robert Rodriguez 2 times when he was on my street. In other words, and then he confirmed on Facebook about his roles with the untimely death confessions, which is also recorded roles within a house in the area involved with one years before that, and the people who were involved with that untimely death with him from the area, who had also, I don't know if they were still living there at the time, but it was involved. In other words, I know there were shortly before that, like a year or two before that. But these are people since everyone was a kid. There are constantly people putting fake motive. They're not legitimately trying to observe people and test people. In other words, there are proofs that Scott Ritter is involved with the Marines with Judge Napolitano. A bunch of people involved with a Charlie Bose. Per them, I never had anything to do with the Charlie Bose. I don't know his sister. If that was his sister, or is his sister at an old town cafe in Old Westfield. A whole bunch of people said that she's involved with them too. Next to Harvard Hospital and next to Fox Connecticut News, with people within my area involved with them, and with police refusing to identify themselves, in courts involved with criminal enterprises and terrorists, and rape threats, even with their Facebook page, before the principal child abuser was caught within the Britain Superior Court. And that was after the World Trade Center attack. Increasingly, the Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts affected all these confessions and requests to help from me since I was a kid from strangers, and with foreign and domestic military. Mark Violet also has his educators recorded confessed demonstrate. I never had him in class. I never saw him around campus trying to make a fake exception. He's one of the ones that made a fake exception real quick, and that's one of the people that are tied to World Trade Center predicate acts. They're faking their motivations for why and how they did that too. They're involved in increasingly wire crimes within the O'Brien family, as one of the people with multiple police departments and Sandy Hook campuses, and including a prison there, involved with them too, with all the prisons and the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, used all kinds of natures of organized crimes, not legitimately, where they are legitimately illegitimate. I'm saying they're involved in time collusions with all kinds of evidences, rack, predicate acts, facts methods, fake motivations planting. This Dave is going to tell you, otherwise he's lying. I never had a conversation with this Dave. He's involved with a Joe DeMoro and a Ray Colo and a Lance Cuddy for the intelligence community, involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, with the leaders of the kids further. And their extended family members are involved with it. And their roles with people with state police, with whiting forensics that are retired and still. And these are people with the UN involved too, with all kinds of medicines corruption and databases racketeering worse than war crimes, with psychiatry right through world wars. They have words like Holocaust and anti-Semitism involved with sequence shifts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, pretending other. You have some sick predators who are Jewish-themed intelligence with the name Riley and Domain involved intercities with wire crime acts and methods, medical offenders of kids, sexual with overt criminal enterprise, not legitimately their roles with that, next to Fox Connecticut News, with people with religious spots next to them too, and all along roads and routes, like even from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield. So please get them on paper, one name in sequence. In other words, Judge Napolitano. And in other words, that's why they can't get on paper. I want a response too. There's a Michael Emmett who's recorded involved with predicate acts with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with the FBI, and further with upskirt pictures on Twitter, and some criminal enterprises involved, and a whole bunch of different countries involved at the same time, including a whole bunch of people tied to a Mike Pandoff on off Town Line Drive, involved with a whole with people I don't even know their names, like from the bordering countries. I don't know if I'm not even talking about the only time I ever saw him there was at a Chinese food restaurant. I believe it's Chinese, and I love China yin yang. But A through Z, you guys can't even appreciate a nature debate necessary to appreciate yin yang, even in China, even in other words, let alone yin yang and alpha and omega together. There are proofs that ancient pantheism appreciated yin yang and alpha and omega about the same way they teach about Boolean logic, but abridged. In other words, those abridgments were forced on names A through Z because they forced locations, areas, and states to operate them to counter things that the breaching method caused wrongly, and then to defend that, and then to have people counter that rightly, but to defend it wrongly too. Defend even though rightly, blaming other things, others themselves as collusions against themselves and others, not even realizing that the breaching method was involved, is involved. That's what they're doing when they have people make confessions about their roles with the KKK and how they do it. Increasingly, people with like the O'Brien family didn't make confessions about a KKK, the two brothers, but they make confessions. They told me to sit in the car in their driveway. They used to live up the street from my house, and they did it in a way that wouldn't make sense. They said that their father had it was right around the time they said their father had a upcoming promotion, and he was a cop. I should have told my parents. Really, I didn't tell my parents things because there is measuring. They do things off campus to measure if who's going to tell their parents or who's not going to tell their parents, and that's one of the things they're sensing. Where and how they're constantly acting, where people time people they don't even know, and make it, and then years later more and more that got brought up. So I learned about this in ways that we could all observe, because these are also names next to each of the campuses I went, who went out of their way, even with the news, to pretend ties to me. There is a teacher with the name O'Neill who has her kids. She's recording, confessing, demonstrating, and confirming they're involved with identity theft and frauds with her, with the sexual and medical offenders of kids, like named Leahy too, and people with Hartford Hospital involved with her, with a Principal Bean, with some upskirt pictures, with the FBI on Twitter for still too, and Whiting Forensics has collusions with them with that, and state police families interstates with the same house/S involved too, with the falsified police reports and the police that pretended to meet conversations with them at the police department as a kid and then as an adult. The kids who did go down there and speak to them, they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They made them paint fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. They told them they didn't want to do it. They gave affidavits on that. In other words, and then years later, they Chris Walters sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They influenced him to federal crimes with investigators and next to the sides of Central Connecticut State University, and with people involved all along Route 3 and its conjunctions to that, and people all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield and conjunctions to that, and spots next to the founding locations like Old Town Cafe. He has something to do with the federal agencies, foreign and domestic military, and intelligence all along that route, with predicate acts of facts and databases, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and their roles with differences, racketeering, fake motivations. And it's also not personal. And where and how it's personal, the difference of that too, they want to have that they're needing to hide how they've been playing differences like that. The judges and prosecutors and ones with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices involved with sexual and medical offenders of elderly homes with the same families that were involved with the child abusers forced. And there are proofs that they're next to the veterans' homes too. Discern how those veterans' homes look just like those buildings in the background in rap videos, and the shock and awe relative to how the suburbs and the suburban/urban that Hartford was converted to be. They converted the homes to 2 family, and 3 family throughout the country played out this pattern that was built before America's founders were born, built for the torture, factory nature, and extortion and slavery. Factory nature, slavery of our founders too. That's what they communicated. That's what they declassified for us. That's what rolls with those crazy laws were. Black pupils, it appear they are. Don't disbelieve. See, president slash chief. In other words. So, in other words, to represent President Trump, you have to understand American history. And for the other countries to represent their leaders properly, they have to understand their own country's history, tactically ulterior than where they're forced to entertain it. The suits and ties, counters, and exceptions. We have to appreciate the hyper-archaeological black people who they want to pretend passions and emotions. Someone was doing it on Facebook, but this people tied to this Leahy family too. His daughter is involved with sexual and medical offenders, with men and women in a Leahy family that work at Hartford Hospital, also with people named Lombardo, also involved with the Department of Transportation, Department of and also these are people that confess them tied to themselves with the people with the corrections offices and judicial branch offices. And these are also people that have been spreading lies into the gyms and rolls with the black KKK Confederate flag scene and pretending to be against hate groups as collusions with them because their differences, rackets, rolls, cover-ups. Because that's what nature is constantly demonstrating to us. So you don't leave out, like when people make opinions about what witch trials were. They're criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, rock, collusion /S, replacing still what our founders communicated about the value of those founding locations. You guys won't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. And no wild tactically delusions raw. In other words, and you guys aren't fake in other words, especially if that Casper, there's a Czech Casper, apparently wants to fight me, but he's got people that directed him to non-verbally make it look like we were in places that were and spoke or that we never did. He has people all along Route 175 from the founding locations and conjunctions to it, like Ridge Road, involved with wire crime action methods, putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties between people, and fake motivations for it. Increasingly, people tied to mayors from Wethersfield and people in conversations with them about me that are sticking fake things and others. They're sticking fake things in databases. I can only force this out to help all of us towards the crimes against me. So please help me, people. Mandated law says they're using crime methods where they won't identify themselves legitimately into branch, and they recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm they've been stacking predicate acts with facts in their databases since I was a kid, and with former director of the FBI and with other agencies and their educators putting kids that they don't even know into fake ties, fake natures of ties to themselves. That's really why and how they're still bringing in crimes onto the people on campuses and speaking to the leaders of the kids behind their back about their roles with crimes in the streets. Their roles with the crimes in the streets, they're going to see is other. They're trying. The breaching method shows them how they have to hide things by keeping other things, others, or selves blamed for collusions with itself at each age and nature of campus. But as collusion /S with the use of location /S. Every single one, everywhere the species body has a body standing. As styles of logic, natures of logic, the way the breaching method employed black pupils. Otherwise, that body senses. That body is sensed, even if that body is a majority of people, even if it is everybody. Any grouping of countries, while you're still locations, areas, and states used remotely, it's not even debatable. Your principles on American history. The difference that you guys speak about, if you don't know this, Russians don't even probably know Russian history. People who know about American history, they're using their knowledge of good and evil to get over on this principle. James Madison's communications, declassified. and how we could observe being having been used remotely. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim, but right where we could observe it, they was self value, not just naturally embarrassed. The names of the people, the sciences. So, in other words, the Facebook also has Marines from Newington involved with ones from Weathersfield, and they're pretending passions, emotions, fake tough guys. That's why we need to get that guy. Who's that guy on Newington with the Marines? Please, Judge Napolitano, Scott Ryder. Make sure I get him. Let's fight in the ring for charity. Well, let me show you the cowards you have with the Marines. And why don't they get the paper? Get them on paper, one name in sequence, please. Get me off the fake conversations with Channel 3 News, WFSB. They have increasingly roles on off the state capital with the Marines too, breached with a whole bunch of different countries. They said they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their roles all along Route 3 through time with a whole bunch of different countries. There are proofs that DACA has something to do with their roles with psychiatry through world wars. And since the World Trade Center attack, has collusions that the Marines and the Air Force had through other natures of organized crimes, with their names at the World Trade Center and the spots next to it involved, and the court next to it, and all sides of criminal and civil cases interstates. Hey, please get them on paper, Judge Napolitano. Please do what's right. I don't know how to get hurt. I don't know. I know that Joshua Julian is with Facebook and with the FBI, with courts, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with hate groups, and with people at Harvard Hospital that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed digital crimes of him and pretending others simultaneously. A Judge Killian and his family also has roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and communications racketeering worse than war crimes. That there are proofs that there are self-value roles with the FCC has and has had. Black pupils. Period. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. Judge Napolitano, do what's right. Scott Ritter, who disbelieves. Get them on paper. Judge Napolitano, please. In other words. The police brought this up with their halfway confessions over the phone, too. Don't forget that they fake conversations with me that weren't at all when I was a kid at the police station and then as an adult. Increasingly, they have people with my algebra class teacher named Riley involved with some Jewish themed, planting evidence on all sides of my house from people from other areas, and sexual and medical offenders of kids involved with the intelligence with them next to Fox Connecticut News. Increasingly, their roles with the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano and of Judges A through Z. Here, Anthony, get them on paper, one name in sequence. Let me teach you guys something.